not the most ideal outfit that I'd like to wear, but after the last video, I really like to wear something a little more modest. I'm not here to look good, I'm just here to give you some tips. Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be about how to study in math. I know it's a downright insane thought, but I personally believe that anyone can be good at math or at least have a basic understanding of the math class that they're currently in. Chances are if you're watching this video, you really do struggle with math, and I will definitely try to do my best to help you out without actually teaching you any math. It's definitely the worst feeling to not understand what is actually happening in your class, especially when you're constantly asking yourself, will I ever use these skills in the future? And the answer to that is probably, because a lot of fields use math, and some of these include physics, psychology, philosophy, chemistry, biology. So it's not just for people who want to be engineers or doctors or anything like that. It is used in many different fields. I know my best friend is a psychology major and she had to take up to Calculus 1. It kind of didn't make sense to me at first, but then she told me that it's probably for people who end up doing research in psychology. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm a computer science and engineering student. I have taken up to Calculus 3 so far, and I took linear algebra last semester, and this summer I'm going to be taking differential equations. There have been some points in my life where I understood things very quickly and didn't really need to try, but I've also had my fair share of times where I just couldn't get what I was supposed to do for the life of me. Just this last semester actually, I started differential equations, but unfortunately I did have to drop it because I couldn't put in the time and effort to do well in that class. So since I'm gonna try and take it again this summer, this video is also kind of for myself because I am a little intimidated by that class. I really don't think that math is a thing where you either get it or you don't. I agree that it may be a little bit harder for some people to understand it, but I truly believe that it's a skill that with more practice you can develop it. If you're new to my channel, my name is Janelle and I like to make videos about how to improve your life in school and in general. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, definitely subscribe because I post new videos every week. So first off, I want to go over a few basic things that you should be keeping in mind if you're struggling in any sort of class. This doesn't even have to be math. This is generally what you should be doing if you struggle in a certain class. First of all, you should be attending all of your classes. This is just a given. Well, actually, all of these are kind of a given. Don't miss class. Do the homework. Find someone to study with. This is not as obvious, but it really does help to have someone in the class to be able to talk to and to ask questions about the homework with. Don't be afraid to ask questions in the class. Professors always say this, but I'm gonna say it again. If you have a question about anything, chances are someone else has the same question and they're just not as confident to speak up about it. And then also take a little bit of time to practice every day. This kind of has to do with completing the homework. If you continue on with the repetition, that really does help in allowing you to learn the material. My first actual tip when it comes to doing any math problems is to start recognizing the patterns in the homework. You may have noticed that your math professors assign you a lot of homework, and that is for a very good reason. And that's kind of for you to subconsciously make connections in your mind. I personally believe this is related to muscle memory, almost that you're subconsciously doing the math problem, like you don't really need to think about it anymore, you know exactly what to do. When you start to recognize the patterns in the homework, you're not as much focused on the numbers or how hard the problems are, you're more focused on making connections. I don't know if that makes sense, but I will go into detail about how to do that if you're not sure how to do that. One way to recognize patterns is to think about all the previous problems that you've completed and ask yourself what problem looks exactly like the one that you're doing. When you actually do find a problem that looks really similar to the one that you're currently stuck on, you can then ask yourself, what did I do in that problem? And how can I replicate that? And then for the harder problems that you might not be sure what is going on in that problem, you can ask yourself, how can I make this problem look like this other problem that was way easier to solve? I know that normally in math books, they start from like super easy and they get progressively harder towards the end. When you're on those questions that are further on in the homework, try and look back on the previous ones that you've done and try to manipulate your problem to make it look like the easier problem. Another tip is to list out what you need to do in step form. This is kind of similar to the last tip, but it's a more concrete way of making patterns. I think it'd be useful if before an exam, like a couple days before, you make yourself a cheat sheet, but try and reference this cheat sheet as little as possible. You don't really want to use it as a crutch. You know, you're not gonna be able to use this during an exam, but what I'm trying to emphasize is the actual act of listing out the steps to do to solve a problem, because then like this is an actual practical way of recognizing patterns in your homework. The next tip is to figure out what step 1 is. This is also kind of related to the previous tip, but this is for one of those times when you see a problem and instantly your heart just drops. We've all had those problems that look entirely impossible to solve, but there's a way to solve them, and freaking out about the problem is not gonna solve it. My physics professor always said this during her lectures. Whenever she would ask a question that she knew that we were gonna freak out about, she would always be like, don't freak out, don't freak out. And I thought it was the funniest thing ever, because she totally understands that there's just problems that when you immediately look at it, you just freak out. But whenever you have these types of problems, try and take a deep breath. Try to remember what is the first step. And for some problems, it might be asking that question that I previously mentioned before: how can I make this problem look like this other problem that was much easier to solve? And I mention this because you don't want to focus so much on how hard the question is. Instead, focus on figuring out what is the next step. And the same goes for those problems where you've already started it, but then you realize in the middle of the problem that it is much harder than you expected. The next tip is to narrate your process. Have you ever had that moment where you think you understand something, but then when someone asks you to explain it, your mind suddenly goes blank? But then you actually think of a way to explain it, and once you do, you feel like you understand it way better than you did before. That's actually exactly what's happening. When you explain things, you tend to grasp the material better. For some reason, speaking out what you're doing allows you to make connections that you wouldn't have otherwise made by just simply writing them down. This is obviously easier when you have someone to study with, but you can always look like a crazy person and just explain it to yourself. And even better when the person that you're explaining it to doesn't get it the first time and you're kind of forced to explain it in a different way. But even if you're not 100% confident on the problem that you're doing, try and explain it anyway. I know I always have a light bulb moment when I'm forced to explain something even though I don't fully understand what I'm doing. My sixth tip is to actually walk away from your homework. You ever get those shower thoughts or like random thoughts that occur to your mind when you're doing something really random, like taking a walk without your phone, or like, you know, you're in the shower so you don't have your phone in there either. Sometimes when you're dealing with a really hard problem, you kind of just have to walk away because you're way too focused on the problem. And this seems kind of counterintuitive, but there's really no point in stressing yourself out by trying to solve this problem. Sometimes the answer might come much easier to you if your mind is more relaxed. This is kind of another reason why you should not try and cram everything into one day, because if you try to do your homework all in one day, you won't have time to walk away from a problem and then come back to it, because the math is kind of more like a daily habit than it is something that you constantly avoid doing. So I don't suggest taking a shower in the middle of doing your math homework. I mean, if you really need to take a shower, then do it. But I suggest trying to take a walk without your phone. Try to relax your mind for a little bit, maybe meditate. Sometimes math takes a little bit of creativity. You kind of need a more relaxed mind to be able to come up with ideas to solve problems. I know it's hard to do math. Well, most of the time actually. It's really easy to try and avoid doing math, but if you truly want to get better, I suggest spending at least an hour every day going over your math problems. Even if you don't actually solve a problem, think about how you would solve a problem and try and narrate in your mind or out loud, as I mentioned before, on how you would approach this problem. I have one last tip, and this is something that people tend to overlook, and whenever I say this, people like just straight up don't believe me when I say it. I really believe that anyone can improve their math skills. I think people tend to self-sabotage when they truly believe that they can never be good at math, and that's just not true. As I've said before, math is a skill that you can develop over time with enough practice and with enough hard work. Yeah, it might not come as easily to you as it does for some other people. That doesn't mean that you can't do it. I almost think of it like lifting weights. If you're instantly trying to lift a really heavy weight and you can't do it, you're not gonna think to yourself, I just can't lift weights. You're gonna think, well, I've never done this before, so I just need to work my way up. And it's the same thing with math. You can't expect yourself to be good at something right away, and then if you're not good at it, you can't tell yourself that you'll never be good at it. You can always develop your skills. So get out of that negative mindset. Be more positive. Try not to compare yourself with other people. Some people just freaking get it and they're geniuses, but most of us are not. I know I'm dumb as heck. Like, I always read things too fast. I always make tiny mistakes, but I try not to beat myself up over them and try to understand that we're all human beings. We can't be good at everything, but we can certainly try. So that is it for some of my tips on how to study in math and develop your math skills. I truly hope that this helps you out. I would want nothing more than to have more people succeed in math, because it is really hard. When you're just not good at something, you don't feel confident about it, and it's really hard to buckle down and try and do those homework problems when you don't freaking get it. Try your best, ask for help, do the homework, practice. You will get there. And if you are good at math, be patient with your friends who aren't as good at math. It's not helping anyone if you get angry at them for not understanding it. In fact, I think it makes them even more anxious if you're angry at them. So be patient with your friends. If you have any more tips on how to study for math, please leave them in the comments below, because a lot of people really do struggle with math and they need as much help as they can get. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any video suggestions, leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, because I post new videos every Sunday at 9 a.m. And if you're a forgetful person like I am, click that notification bell so you can be reminded when every time I upload. Every time I upload. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.